Minister, good morning. Welcome.
Nice to be with you, Barry.
Should Australia start preparing for the day when there will be no steel industry?
I don't think so. We want a successful, competitive steel industry here in Australia. It's an important part of our manufacturing sector. It employs thousands of Australians. That's why the Turnbull government's taken a number of steps to support the steel industry. We've strengthened our anti-dumping provisions. We've brought forward the purchase of steel for major projects like the Adelaide to Tarcoola rail project, and the Prime Minister in Victoria just announced a $220 million freight rail project, and we abolished the carbon tax, which was punishing on energy-intensive industries like the steel industry.
But you're not talking about mandating that government agencies, government organisations always give steel contracts.
Well, Barry, this is an extremely reckless position that the Leader of the Opposition, Bill Shorten,
supported by Christopher Pyne.
No, it's not. Actually, Christopher Pyne said that this was an irresponsible position by the Labor Party. You see, for 30 years in this country...
Christopher Pyne said this is something that should happen.
No. Christopher Pyne said it was irresponsible to mandate the purchase of Australian steel for projects here in Australia. You see, for 30 years, we've been working towards...
He nevertheless said it should happen.
No, he didn't.
Now, that's a subtle difference.
Barry, he didn't. We've been working for 30 years towards a bipartisan consensus towards an open, competitive economy. Bill Shorten's position repudiates that, and it will have two profound effects. Firstly, it will drive up the cost to taxpayers, because by saying that a monopoly provider will not have competition in a tender process will reduce any incentive to reduce price. So that's the first point. The second is it will invite retaliatory action from our free trade partners, because we have a number of agreements, be it with Singapore, with Japan, with Korea, with the United States, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which prevent Australia from giving preferential access to domestic suppliers. You see, we're a trading nation. We benefit from trading to the world. Our companies, our service providers, our farmers all benefit from access to open markets. What Bill Shorten has done in this very reckless position has put that all in jeopardy.
Why did this mill fail? Is it because it simply had a poor business model?
Well, obviously they ran up a lot of debt, $2.8 billion worth of debt, and there was obviously some regrettable decisions by management. But I note that the voluntary administrators have said that with the support of their financiers, with the support of their employees, with support of their suppliers and their contractors, that the company can actually trade as business as usual.
Now, as Resources Minister, and we constantly hear the mining boom is over, Malcolm Turnbull was again talking yesterday about the transition to a new economy, and yet it's not finished, far from it. Colin Barnett yesterday, the Premier of Western Australia, says it's still the biggest game in town. Do we tend to underestimate the contribution of the mining industry?
Well, the mining industry is absolutely totemic to the Australian economy. I mean, it's around 10% of our GDP, employs around 300,000 Australians, and it's more than 50% of what we export. But what the Prime Minister and the Treasurer and myself and others are referring to with the transition is that as a proportion of GDP, the investment in resources sector has come down quite substantially. So it's still very important. We're the world's largest exporter of iron ore, the world's largest exporter of coal, we have the world's largest uranium reserves, and will soon become the world's largest exporter of LNG, overtaking Qatar by 2020. That produces billions of dollars worth of export income for our country, so it's still very important, but that rate of growth and investment, because we've moved out of the investment stage now to the production stage, has definitely slowed.
It's slowed, but then you look at the forecast that came out from the industry department on Friday, and a metric tonne for iron ore was US dollars $45. It was 41. That's up to 45 now, rising to 56 next year and 61 after that. That's a significant rebound.
It is, but it's not the $180 a tonne that we saw when iron ore hit its peak. And what we're seeing with the pricing of iron ore, like what we're seeing with the pricing of oil and gas, is a complex reflection of supply and demand dynamics. You see, we've invested heavily in production capacity here in Australia. Brazil, the other iron ore producer, has invested heavily. So we're now producing 3 times as much iron ore as we were previously, and we're exporting as much. So into the market, you've seen more supply, and obviously demand has either plateaued or gradually increased, and so therefore that has led to a decreasing pressure on price.
What impact, though, will that have on the budget?
Well, as you know,
as the price rebounds?
Well, as you know, Barry, in my EFO, we priced iron ore at $39 a tonne. As we sit here this morning, it's just over $50 a tonne. So that's good news for our budget because it's our largest export.
Now, on the budget, and the Prime Minister did yesterday say that there will be some changes to the tax system. Are you able to sit here this morning, though, and say that there will be the significant changes to the tax system that the economy demands?
Well, we'll make changes to the tax system to incentivise investment, encourage entrepreneurship and get more people into the workforce.
But what does that? What kind of changes does that?
Well, for example, last year's announcement in the budget about the small business tax cut did exactly that. The Prime Minister's announcement in his innovation statement around removing the capital gains tax in burden for people who are investing in startup companies did exactly that. Whereas the Labor Party, and this is a ideological distinction between us and them, the Labor Party are focusing on tax as a revenue grab to fund their big spending. And we don't believe you can tax and spend your way to prosperity. The government is like a household. It has a budget and we have to live within our means. And that's what you'll see from Scott Morrison's budget. But when it comes to tax, we've already made a number of changes. We've got rid of the carbon tax, the mining tax, the small business tax cut and the capital gains tax. But what we can't afford, Barry, is to go down Labor's tax and spend path, because particularly when it comes to negative gearing, and the Prime Minister has made this very forcefully time and time again, the Labor Party's negative gearing policy will drive down housing prices, will drive down investment and increase rents. And when it comes to their capital gains tax provisions, it will actually stifle the type of entrepreneurship and innovation we're trying to encourage as a country.
Let's focus on what lies ahead for the government. And can you politically cut company taxes without having a corresponding cut to taxes for PAYE earners?
Look, I'm not going to give you a budget revelation here today, and I know that Arthur Sinodinos has previously on your program talked about company taxes, and we do know that Australian company taxes are high.
But can you do one without the other, given that this is going to be right on the cusp of an election?
Well, let's just see what transpires in the budget.
All right, OK. And you've shortlisted, and I want to go back to the question of nuclear waste, which is a big issue that's still ticking away. You've shortlisted 6 sites. I understand on Friday you met with 6 landholders.
Correct.
Who have offered up their land, and you can understand why, because they stand to make perhaps 4 times the value of their land if they sell and make it available.
Which might not be a lot of money, by the way, Barry.
Right, but does that mean, though, that there is a bit of an auction going on? They're keen to sell?
Well, it's not so much as an auction. We're trying in a bipartisan way, and I have to congratulate Gary Gray and the Labor Party for the way they've approached this issue. What we're trying to do is solve a long-standing problem in this country, which is we produce low-level and intermediate waste. We have Lucas Heights reactor. We produce 10,000 doses of nuclear medicine every week, and 1 in 2 Australians benefit from those nuclear medicines. But that waste needs to be stored somewhere, and currently it's stored at around 100 different sites around the country. It might be at a university or a hospital or Lucas Heights itself. And we need to find a single repository, just like they have in Spain, South Africa, the United Kingdom and France. And that's what we're trying to do now. And we've invited voluntary nominations from landowners. We got 28. We reduced it to 6. And we're going to reduce that list again.
Now, I can
shortly.
understand them being enthusiastic, but the communities around them, not so much.
It's mixed. It has to be said it's mixed, but what we've been trying to do is dispel some of the myths, because if you go to the Champagne region in France or the Lake District in the United Kingdom, they've got one of these repositories there for radioactive waste, and it sits side by side with popular tourism spots and popular agricultural sectors.
In the end, though, do you take in the environmental and geological considerations, or do you choose the community with least resistance?
Oh, look, it's a combination of both. What we've sought to do here is not impose a decision on a local community. That's been done in the past, and for 30 years we haven't found an answer to this solution. But this is in the national interest. This is a very important decision, and the Turnbull government's gone about it in a considered way.
Now, just finally, Bill Shorten has announced a Royal Commission into the banks. Some MPs on your side have supported it. The Prime Minister delivered a long speech yesterday and didn't mention it. Does that suggest that he's read the politics of this?
Well, you have to say about Bill Shorten, I'm not sure what he actually believes in, Barry, because just last year, him and his party voted against the Royal Commission. Now he's calling for it, and we've seen his other flip-flops on a whole range of other issues. When it comes to a Royal Commission, we have just had a major financial systems inquiry, the first since Wallace more than 2 decades ago. That led to a number of recommendations which the government has adopted to strengthen the powers of ASIC and to ensure better consumer outcomes. Now, ASIC and APRA, they have stronger powers than a Royal Commission.
They haven't stopped abuses that are still going on.
Well, we've actually just introduced some changes, so we've got to give it time to work. But this government has been working on a whole series of reforms to get better outcomes in the financial services sector. But this is just a distraction from Bill Shorten. He's shown that he's not prepared to listen to a Royal Commission with the Australian Building Construction Commission. So I just think this is a bit of populist politics.
So you're saying to people who are concerned about the banks that you've got it under control?
Well, I'm saying we are concerned about the culture in the banks, and the Prime Minister's had some very strong words to say directly at a Westpac function, and that resonated loudly. At the same time, we've introduced a whole series of other reforms to ensure that the banking sector produces better consumer outcomes. But this call for a Royal Commission goes against the Labor Party's own position just a year ago. Bill Shorten does not listen to Royal Commissions because otherwise he would implement the Australian Building and Construction Commission, and we are doing a lot to support a better financial system at a time when the financial system is integral to the strength of the Australian economy and job creation.
Thanks for your time this morning.
Good to be with you, Barry.